Great. So I want to jump back into shared hands voicings. We're going to do a little bit of review today. Maybe get into a little bit of reharmonization and making things a little bit more fancy, adding movement, colorful on these shared hands voicings. So I always like to do this as a way to review, find the errors exercise. So Colleen pointed out the first error, which is that in the statement of there is at least one per measure. I forgot a second E in the word there. But let's start with the first measure. Does anybody want to give me a zoom hand and tell me what's wrong? Yeah, Tom.
The seventh is doubled, right?
Great. Yeah, so we should not have doublings except for in several emergency cases. So we don't want to have two D's in that chord. That's exactly right. It sounded like you were going to say more, though. You got more?
No, I didn't have more. No.
Okay, perfect. Because I don't have more either. Tom, could you think of a solution for that issue?
Well, you don't have a fifth in there, although I guess that's a pretty big reach if you're going from the low E to the. Well, it's a big reach either way. Jeez. Um,
Well, you could play the root and the fifth in the left hand, and
yeah,
then
that's
G,
that's
C,
what I meant.
D,
But then I
right?
realized it seems like a big reach to have the E flat, the B flat, and the G, but maybe not.
Yeah, it might be okay. Any other thoughts? No. I mean, another option. If you guys have studied with me for a little while, you know I love these double thumb or corner thumbs. If we delete the D and make it an F, and we can at least it makes it a little bit excuse me easier. We can play both the F and the G with our thumb potentially. So that's another possibility. Great, thank you, Tom. John, are you taking the next measure? Do you have more issues with that measure? John, are you
Can you hear me? I'll do both, I guess.
okay?
I think that C is a little questionable in the right hand because the melody goes below it and you're holding it out.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like a full step from the melody note. I would just leave the C out or maybe put it in the left hand when you've got the F. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right that it's a little bit awkward. I wouldn't mark it necessarily as an error, but probably my preferred voicing there. That's not helpful. Let me do this way. I would
Yeah,
probably actually
that's what I
play
was
like
thinking.
this. You can't see the E flat because I don't know why in this app it's not working. um, but I prefer that a little bit. So to me, if I did play like I don't it doesn't really bother me that much that the melody goes beneath that eventually, but I take your point.
Okay, in the next bar, this again, the C, the half step between the melody note, the C and the D flat are kind of
It's a little
questionable.
crunchy. Yeah,
But
I think that's questionable. I wouldn't mark it wrong, but yes, I agree.
but the definite problem is on the next chord where you have a C flat and a
Mm-hmm.
C in the melody and a D flat.
Great. So what's the problem there?
Well, you have a minor ninth and a
Good.
major seventh between the melody. Minor ninth really is the problem.
Good. Yeah, the seventh doesn't bother me a bit. You're often gonna have to have the seventh between the melody. That minor ninth though does bother me. Anyway.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah, no good there. It would also be pretty hard to play. What note could we choose instead of that C flat?
maybe an F, a D flat
Okay.
and an F.
Yeah, that would be nice. Or even an F flat, the flat nine would be
Yeah.
really nice. They both work. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, John. So John said it, I think, really fantastically. That there's a minor ninth interval between the C flat and the C, which is almost always going to be a problem. Another way that you might look at that is to see that you have a natural 13th and a flat 13th. and we probably almost never want to have two different versions of the same chord tone. So that's another way that you could kind of look at that problem. Let me just circle back here for a second because I did want to review some of the ways in which doubling is allowed. Okay, so when is doubling allowed? So first of all, if the root is the melody note, then we kind of have to double, right? If we're on an E flat major and we have E flat in the melody, the top and the bottom note are going to be the same, right? No ways around that. If the melody is an essential tone and it's high, then we miss hearing that essential tone close to what I call the magic range, right? Part of what makes a chord sound like a chord in jazz, at least, is that we hear the third and the seventh in that range around middle C. So if if we're getting up to a third way up here, it's not really going to serve that function of a third. So in that case, we might add things down below. People sometimes ask me for an exact placement, and it's always kind of hard to give that. But you could use this middle line of the right hand as kind of a boundary of like, if it's above that, you're probably going to want to add it down below. And then lastly, when we start getting outside of major, minor, and dominant seventh chords, especially diminished, half diminished chords, and inversions, a lot of those chords are going to want to take doublings because there's just not that many great color tones to go with them. All right, doing great. How about this A flat major 7? Anybody want to raise their Zoom hand and volunteer? So this doesn't sound bad. Anybody see a problem there? It's kind of a small one. Yeah, Gary, you want to take a shot at it?
Well, I don't think. I mean, there's no major seventh, but we've
Good,
replaced. So I don't know
yeah.
if that's really a problem or not, but it does say a flat major 7, so that's the only thing I see.
Yep, I think technically that's a problem. Sometimes we change seventh chords out for sixth chords, but I want to get in the habit of always putting that third and seventh in if we're supposed to. So what might we trade out for that major seventh?
Um, you mean for the instead of the 6th, or where would we?
Yeah, we
Or we
could.
could put a corner thumb on the 6th and the 7th.
Cool, yeah, if we want to make a 6-note voicing, we could slide it in there,
Right,
or we could take out the F and
kind of
replace it with
crunchy, or take out the.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Thank you, Gary. Is that a question, Tom?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if why the major seventh on the final note of that bar doesn't sort of count towards that chord. I mean, does it have to be sort of an establishing tone in order to sort of fill out that palette?
Yeah, so when we're making these shared hands voicings, we're only taking into account the melody note that happens simultaneous with the change of the chord. Because that's kind of how we end up hearing harmony, is we hear everything together when the chord changes.
Yeah.
So even though we do see that there is a major seventh later, we're going to feel that the chord is empty or it doesn't quite have that same character um, until we get there. So, and there is a certain power to notes heard together that we don't have when, like as a chord, that we don't have when the notes are separated out. So yeah, we're always thinking about what's happening simultaneous with the chord change. Good question. All right, and then we've got this last measure. Anybody want to take it? Yeah, Noriko. Noriko, I'm gonna unmute you.
Oh, shoot. Oh, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Doubling the melody to B flat in the middle, and this.
Sorry, where's the doubling of the melody?
The B flat. I mean, C. Oh, this is. I'm sorry, C flat. So that means B.
That's the third. That's the third of the chord.
Yeah, but this melody is like hot. half the crashing.
That's not a problem. That interval's a major seventh. That's very normal.
Oh, okay. So then, uh, 6F is
Uh-huh.
that in the -7?
Good. Yeah, we don't want to use the 6th or the 13th in a minor 7. And I'll just talk about that for a second. If you're playing a modal tune, if you're playing So What, absolutely use all the notes of the Dorian mode, including the 6th in your voicings. In a 2-5, kind of a progression through the circle of fifths like this, we do want to avoid that note because it's basically stealing the thunder from the dominant chord. It's really kind of turning that minor 7th into a dominant chord. And it's creating a tritone between the 6th and the 3rd, which also makes it sound like a dominant chord. So that's no good. Noriko, do you want to pass it on to somebody else, or do you see any other problems with this measure?
The last one, right? It's so much jump. You can pass to somebody because I don't find anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Max, is that what your hand's up for? Max, are you there? Here, I'm gonna unmute you. I love
Can
that
you
I
hear me?
unmute you guys. Yes.
Hi, Jeremy. That F was, I didn't know why it sounded wrong, and thanks for the explanation there for the A flat minor 7 chord. I think the next chord it's fine, but maybe we can, instead of having double the root there, we could probably use a 9th or something like that.
Yeah, I agree
That's all.
completely.
Yeah.
We don't want to double a D flat, and I think putting in a 9th, maybe a flat 9, a sharp 9 is a great solution.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's do a D natural just for fun.
Okay.
Thanks, Max.
Thank.
So I'd probably first of all lower that F to an E flat. And I change that D flat to a D. All right, so let me play for you how this sounds. I'll change that. So you can get really solid voicings this way. These are voicings that I would totally use in a professional context. And we'll review kind of the steps in just a second. Anybody want to ask any questions about what we just did? Anything we missed? Going once, going twice. Okay. So I did get a couple of submissions from students that I wanted to go over real quickly. So I've got a submission from Bake and from Luis. Was there anybody who wanted to play their version of In a Mellow Tone? If so, go ahead and raise your Zoom hand, and I'll see how many people there are, and we'll do that as well. So, Bake, I hope you don't mind me pulling yours up here. All right, so first chord, you need a D natural here, because it's a B flat 7, and then we're doubling the F, right? We don't want that. I'd probably take it out of the right hand. This is very fancy. For now, using the 11th for a dominant chord is probably not a thing I would advise. Good, that A flat 6 works well. Throughout, my recommendation has been to use 5 notes, and you're definitely at more of 6 or 7. So if it were me, I would like take out this F here. Good, there's another 6-note chord. I'm gonna take out that A flat. The A flat sounds fine. Good. I mean, the D flat sounds colorful and modern, but generally I would not suggest using an 11th in a major 7th chord. That's cool. Good. Good. Again, watch out for the doubling here between the A flat and the A flat. I wouldn't do it. Okay, I know you got another page, but I want to keep it moving. So I want to look at Luis's. Yes, this is kind of interesting actually. So Luis included an A flat in his chord. And I could imagine that he was kind of thinking, well, it's holding over on the end of 4. That's not coming right with the chord. It's pretty tricky, but I would actually count ands of 4s as being basically the same as beat 1. So I probably would not double that note, even though technically you're actually following my rules really well. The and of 4 is kind of always thought of as this anticipation of the downbeat. So I would come up with a voicing without the A flat in it. This is good. The bass is just kind of high here. So I would either try to reach that 10th or use a tritone. Good, that sounds great. So technically, Luis, this chord here doesn't have the 7th. Okay, so I would include that D flat, and then this next one doesn't have the 3rd, which is C. And actually, this D flat is going to really want to resolve to that C. Again, even though this is an anticipation, I think I would probably avoid that note because it's coming in on the and of 4, which is just about as good as beat 1. So same thing then there. Good. The next couple are great. Good. Same thing with that anticipation. Good. And I would just steer you towards including some alterations on the dominant chords. It's especially when you have just a 5 chord, like that's the E flat 7 is the 5 of the key. I would really try to have at least one alteration. It sounds a little bit bland without it. And feel free here as well, you know, adding a D flat already will add a lot of color. I tell my students, like, I'm altering 90% of my dominant chords, and probably 50% of them have at least 2 alterations. So make it the rare dominant chord that for some very particular reason, because you're referencing some sort of a particular style, you don't alter. But in general, I would put at least 1 alteration on. But good job, guys. Yeah, it's looking good. It's surprises as low as 90%. That's my best estimate. Maybe somebody will do an official peer-reviewed study someday. All right, so we've got 2 volunteers to play. We've got Greg and Dan. Greg, you want to go ahead and play first?
Hey, Jeremy, I uploaded something like 5 minutes before the hour. Do you want to maybe go to Dan and in the meantime, see if you can get mine?
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. All right, Dan, ready or not?
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, well, I souped mine up a little bit, so I'll play it, and you want me to stop, just yell out stop.
Cool. Just double check that your original sound is on.
Oh, that's a good. Yep. Okay, there it is.
Ah, beautiful. Okay.
All right. I know I did it. Ah, that's not right. I'm gonna play that again.
Yeah, bravo, Dan. I thought that was really nice. I thought the voicings were good. I thought you added a lot of interesting movement in the arrangement. I thought it came off really well. You did this sometimes, but I'll just mention that one thing that I would probably do more. This is such a call and response melody. Right? It's kind of one bar on, one bar off, one bar on, one bar off. In fact, like, it's amazing. It's a tribute to how good of a composer and songwriter Ellington was that he was able to pull off a melody quite this predictable phrasing wise, because it never really breaks from that pattern, right? Like, every phrase ends on the end of 4, leading into the next measure. So if it were me, I'd probably play off of that call and response a little bit more.
Okay.
So. And really think about, letting the melody have its spotlight and then creating in the spaces and, putting all of my fancy stuff in the spaces.
Okay.
That, of course, can get predictable in its own right. But yeah, that's probably where I would steer you towards. And then really, when it comes time, differentiating among the parts of this form. Do you know, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you know what the form of this tune is?
No, I wasn't paying attention really. I mean, it's
Yeah,
is it A B?
that's okay.
Is it A B? I'm guessing real quick, or A B A C maybe.
Yeah, we usually call this an ABAC form. So, and one of the reasons that that's important is that in an ABAC form, the C section is usually a climax. And you can really see that here, and this is just for everybody, not just for you. You can really see that here because that bass line is going up by half steps, right? And it really kind of goes to that climax. So I think a next step for you would be to really try to differentiate between the A section, the B section, and then especially as you get to that C section, maybe maybe something with more of a locked hands approach. But I'm saying all of this because it's all nuanced because you're doing really great. And then just make sure you're practicing 100% in tempo all the time, even if you mess up. Okay? You should carve out a time in your practice session to practice performing and pretend like you're on stage or in front of people, and that it's imperative that you hide any mistakes, that you keep that time going no matter what.
Yeah, I guess I did in this case because I wanted you to hear the voicings that I was supposed to play because I just felt that that was part of this lesson.
Totally. Yeah.
But
I get
yes,
it.
I got you on that. That's
Yeah, I thought the voicing sounded good. Was there any where you had a particular question?
uh no, I don't think so. I caught that I did like on the B flat seven. I did you know replay the A flat or
And it sounded fine.
but
Yeah,
no, I think nothing I can think of right now.
great.
guess-
Awesome.
All right,
Good
thank
work.
you.
Yeah. So, Greg, do I just have a PDF from you?
Yep, I posted it in the thing, but I've got it right in front of me. Do you want me to just see if I can?
I can send it over to my screen and we can all look at it. Does anybody else have an issue where like the Open Studio site has a tough time, like keeps changing your password, or is it just me? Like, I keep having to change my password. I don't know. You want to play this? It's a lot of notes, a lot of measures.
Yeah, Oh, and so yeah, this was kind of a last minute, and I realized there's a mistake. I'm just going to point out right now. So every time I have an A flat 6, I've got in the right hand a C. I meant to make that an A flat, and I'll play an A flat.
An A flat?
Yeah.
Maybe a B flat? No.
No.
Okay.
No. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Dan. This is not like exactly as you suggested, but what I really wanted to do was like get more bass in, and so like a lot of these I just can't play those intervals, but it sounded okay to me if I just well, let me just play, okay?
Yes. Great.
Can you hear this? Okay.
Nice. Cool, cool, cool. I really like the kind of figuration that you're doing. Right, as long as we have a hint of that.
Jeremy, you can't hear you.
Darn it. Let me say that again. This is better, right? Yes? Okay, cool. So I was just saying that I really like this kind of figuration of arpeggiating the left hand. I think it works really well. And, we don't necessarily always need to hear everything together in order to get a sense of the chord. And it does sound richer than know, if your bass was an octave up. So both are possible, but I thought your choices were really cool. There are a bunch of times where I think you could choose more colorful color tones. So maybe you chose the using an A flat instead of the C on the A flat 6 because you weren't hearing the A flat on bottom, but I don't feel like you need it. So, you know, if I use the 9th instead, I'm happier there. Could say the same thing. I could use the 11th instead of the 5th here, because it does start to be kind of the stack of thirds, which just isn't that fun.
What,
then,
what would you do for the tritone then?
for
No.
the A flat 7 or D7, depending on
Yeah.
how you look at it. I mean, there's so many options. You could use a B as the 13th of the D7. You could use a B flat as the flat 13th. You could use an A
Okay.
flat as the flat 5. Like, you got nothing but options there,
Okay.
right? So yeah, kind of throughout there were some voicings that I wish you substitute in a 13th for a 5th, or add in some alterations on a dominant chord. And then I think you probably know, but the C section let us down a little bit. We needed a few more chord tones on some of these. Was it just a matter of running out of time?
Well, you know, I really wanted to get that bass line, so I just decided to keep it sparse. So, but I hear what you say. I mean, when you were talking to Dan, I mean, I think the lock hands is probably a better choice there.
Yeah, and for everybody, remember that you don't necessarily need to hold out notes that are written as held. So if it's a matter of going all the way up to the F and then down to a voicing in the right hand, I would just let that go. Or do that. Let me do my right hand in slow motion because this is kind of important to see. So I'm doing a finger substitution on that F. Right, my finger substitution, just in case you're not familiar with that term, that means that I'm holding down the key while I'm changing which finger is there. And that allows me to grab both the higher melody and the lower chords while holding that long note. And here there's really plenty of time to try something like that. So,
You know, if I could just ask quickly, so yeah, that sounds great, but are you choosing that to? I mean, by using that approach, it seems like you're not really emphasizing this chromatic going up from a D flat to a D to an E flat, and maybe you just don't think that's worth it.
I still think I am, because I'm connecting the D flat to the D. Right, so we're still able to hear that bass line in that lower register. Maybe it's not emphasizing in that we're hearing the bass alone, but I don't think that's...
Okay.
I think it's that kind of rising feeling that gets
Okay.
it.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else wanting some comments? Thoughts? Okay. Gary. Yeah.
So I practiced for a little bit. This is pretty simple, but I'll go ahead and play it.
Oops. Sorry. Sorry, Alva. Didn't mean to add you. I told some of you last week.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you definitely got original sound on. It sounded a little funky, maybe.
It's on my original sound,
Okay.
right?
Cool. Yeah. fun touches in there. I enjoyed it. Two small comments.
Yeah.
So the first is that your melody feels a little bit, what's the word? A little bit cutesy. Sorry to use that word. Your staccatos are very short. So we kind of get in this feeling. And a lot of the notes are coming in on the beat instead of off the beat. So I kind of heard a lot of da 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 da.
Interesting.
Da, da,
Okay.
da, da, da. Might have just been a small sample size, but we need more legato in general in that melody, and we want to hear a lot of these offbeats.
Okay. Cool.
In the melody. And then just in terms of where we're at in the chorus and the unit, the focus here is on the shared hands voicings.
Right.
Figuring out some voicings where the hands are moving together. And I thought you were playing kind of good voicings melodically, but I didn't really hear a lot of times when the hands are actually coming in together.
Right.
Do you think that you were doing
I was
it?
arpeggiating it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing a lot more arpeggiating.
Right. Right.
So in terms of the skill that I'm hoping you gain in these next
Right.
couple of weeks, I would try to block it out more.
Okay.
And I realize I should be clear, not for you necessarily, but just in general. I sometimes use this term block it out. And what I mean by that is to practice first before adding comping or embellishments or whatever that might be with like literally whole notes, or if the chords move faster, half notes, so that you're playing. And of course, if you have to play the bass a little bit ahead of time, if it's a big reach. So I want you all to be able to do that in
Right.
these next few weeks, and we're going to try to then apply some different styles there. But yeah, for this unit, I think less arpeggios and more playing hands
Cool.
together. So check out that articulation on the melody, and then get
All right.
practice
Thank
blocking
you.
out those chords. Yep, sure thing. I told some of you last week, but I'm working on my Spanish, and I changed all my electronics to Spanish. So I'm like a little slower than normal, pinning and unpinning and unmuting people, because I'm like, I don't want to kick anybody out accidentally by clicking on the wrong button. What's up, Max? Do you want to play?
I have a quick question. For example, on the first measure, you have an A flat, which also is the minor seventh, right? My first instinct was to double that seventh on my left hand. Is that a problem in that range?
So it's a tricky question because of the anticipation, and because everybody's been putting some rhythm into the and I'm just gonna mute you for now because I'm getting echo. So it's a tricky question because the A flat's anticipated, and if we're adding some kind of a call and response rhythm, we're gonna actually kind of do something different. So if I'm playing together, like Bake's version had the two hands coming in together. So if I'm playing together, I'm probably going to leave out that A flat. If I'm coming in like on the downbeat, it's a pretty weird place to comp. But just hypothetically, I'd probably still leave out that A flat because those are like, for all intents and purposes, pretty much together. For me, maybe I want to comp 1, 2, maybe coming in on beat 3. In which case, I think it's totally cool to replay that A flat, and I think we'd actually kind of miss it in the chord if we didn't have it. If we don't have it, it's still actually, it sounds okay leaving it out and choosing another color note. So, Max, I think it really depends for me rhythmically. It's never going to sound awful, especially if your comp is short. But if you're comping on the and a 4 with that melody note or very close to it, I would omit it. if you're comping later in the measure, I think you got options. I think you could include it, or I think you could omit it as well. So I can't give you a like exact cut and dry answer, but I think you got some options. Okay, yeah, thanks. Other questions that are coming up? Anything else coming up here? Okay, cool. Well, we had more volunteers than I expected, which is a good thing. But I thought I'd have more time. So let's just talk through one principle. It's a simple idea with potentially like massive consequences. For those of you who are ready to have some fun with these shared hands voicings, just in a small way. So let's take this voicing for the B flat 7. Sounds like somebody unmuted here. So here's kind of a typical voicing. I've got my 5th above my bass, my 9th, my 3rd. One way that we could create motion or interest is by choosing one of these notes and displacing it by a half step and then resolving it. This is at least related to the idea of a suspension, which many of you have probably heard of, right? Where we kind of hold over a note from a previous chord and then resolve it. But let's look at how this would work. If you're kind of wondering, how might I take these voicings and give them a little more pizzazz, a little bit more motion, a little bit more sophistication. I think we could take each of the notes in the middle of this chord and displace them. So let's start with this F. So we could start with a G flat leading back to an F. Or even an E leading to that F. And I maybe like that a little bit better. Here's the G flat. Here's the E. Right. Okay, so we could take the F and we could play around with it. So notice I just moved it by a half step. We could, if we want to get really fancy, we could move it by 2 half steps too. G, G flat, F. We're just gonna run out of time to do all that motion. But not just the F, I just kind of chose that at random. What if we wanted to move that D around? We could go E flat to D. That's a classic 4-3 suspension. And we could even move this C start on a D flat, or let's call it a C sharp just to make it more legible, like the sharp 9, leading back to the natural 9. And when we get to this E flat 7, well, actually let's go to the A flat 7 because we're probably not going to want to move that much since the melody is moving during this measure. Let's think about this voicing for the A flat 6. But since it's staying the same chord for 2 measures, what we could do is kind of move towards another chord tone and aim to like make a passing tone to another chord tone here. So one kind of fun example is what we might call a voice exchange. We've got the 5th on bottom of the right, sorry, let me say that again. We've got the 5th in the middle of the right hand and the 6th on bottom. Ugh, I'm doing terribly today. Can you tell I woke up at 4? We've got the 5th in the middle of the right hand and the 6th on the top of the left hand. And we could exchange those so that they end up in different places. And they would come together as an E in the middle. That works so nicely. We could kind of do that same thing. Not really quite the same thing. But we could aim for the 3rd to move down to the 9th. Do ya dum. But since the chord needs a 3rd, we would need to also then add the 3rd in here. Otherwise it sounds weird. And this could kind of become like a little diminished chord if you add a neighbor motion there. So I guess what I'm trying to show you is once we have these voicings, we can get playful around each of the notes of the voicings, right? This is part of what we mean by voice leading, is that each of the notes can be on kind of its own little journey. Can move from place to place, create its own tension and release, create its own color, create its own sense of delay. So, you know, when we think about reharmonization, one way to think about it is in terms of chords, right? Greg traded out a lot of dominance for a lot of tritone substitutions, right? Instead of A flat, play D7. And that is definitely, there's a lot that we could talk about in terms of that kind of reharmonization. But we could also look at reharmonization as created by these movements of notes. And some of them might not even necessarily be written as different chords, but might be colored a little bit differently. And we heard some of that in everybody who played today, adding in these little touches. So I know there's some of you out there who are like, how do I get from here to what Dan did or what Greg did or who else played? I can't remember. It's been a long day. Or what Gary did. That's what I meant to say. And so part of it is taking each of these notes and playing around with it, saying, can I displace that and then resolve it? And so that's one of the reasons that I think it's kind of fun to have it actually written out in front of you here. So you can do that kind of play. So speaking of which, for this week's assignment, to continue on with these shared hands voicings, I've given you a sheet very similar to this in a mellow tone sheet with the tune I Should Care. Great jazz standard, also in ABAC form. And I would encourage those of you who are working to follow along and keep up to write out those voicings and practice first blocking them out. I'd be very happy to hear them blocked out. And either record a video, post it. You could post your voicings on the discussion board. I'm going to try to do more of a lecture and less responding to playing in class today. So put it on the discussion board. You could block it out. If you feel ready, you could comp, and you could try to use some of these devices of voice exchange or displacing a note or suspending something that we talked about in class today. All right, have a great one, everybody. I will see you next week, if not sooner. Bye, everyone.